and I couldn't remember if we had already talked about this one or not. But as I was thinking more and more about it, this is just my personal thing. I kind of like debts just because of this economic justice piece. But churches have changed it from what sins, trespasses, and debts on mine. Yeah. So
and somewhere, and I wish I could remember where, there was this long theological, discussion about why debts is the more accurate translation. And maybe it is because it really brings up the economic justice piece of it. But so you wonder why we have changed it to sin.
Yeah, that's what I didn't know if anyone knew the history of why Trinity in particular changed it, or.
Well, I was told when I came, because it was the first time I'd experienced sins in the prayer. And they said a group of people had gone to Montreat, and this was the more updated version.
Okay, that's probably what happened.
Yeah.
We paid attention to what happened at Montreat.
Yeah. 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 It just,
especially in the worship and music conference.
It might just be something for us to, consider, or at least maybe talk about at some point, of, do we still feel comfortable with that change? But anyway.
What is it? What does the prayer say in Luke? Doesn't it say trespasses?
I think so, yes.
I think we think of trespasses as somehow that's referring to sin. But in Matthew, it's definitely referring to debts. And debts were what was controlling people's lives at the time that the prayer was, that Jesus shared this prayer. Debts were very, very important.
Yeah.
It makes you think of the parable of the unjust servant. That the master forgives his debts mammoth, I don't know how many times over, and then he turns around and demands that others repay him.
Right.
And when they can't, he throws them in prison. So, so when you think about forgive us our debts as we forgive those, our debtors, it takes you right to that parable. It's like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, like I said, the more when I was playing with this week, I thought I really kind of like debts better than sins, but that again is just my own personal reaction to it after thinking. Hi, Judith.
Hi, sorry, I couldn't find the link at first. So.
No problem. Well, then I was afraid because in church they put another one in the FaceTime feed. So I was like, no, I resent it out.
Well, I went back to the Friday email from 2 weeks ago and it was in there. So that's
I just used the same one that we'd used in the past.
I think you did send one. I just,
Yeah, it's the same one though.
It's I just figured it was easiest to just go with that same one, but I did want to send it out to you just to make sure everybody had it. That usually comes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got here online here. Sins are sins, debts are debts, and trespasses are trespasses. Lying, cheating, and stealing are sins. Mortgages, car loans, and used lines of credit are debts. Going onto somebody's land when you're not supposed to is trespassing. So there's on your context.
Yeah.
I was told when I was a child that Presbyterians are concerned about money, and Methodists who use trespasses are concerned about property.
Oh, there you go.
That's funny.
So Luke was a Methodist.
Well, that would put it in that context of Linda's.
Yeah.
In that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
Anyway, just something to think about, and but I really do like this explanation of economic justice, and just this morning when we were saying it, when we got to that part, I kind of threw this in since no one could hear me, just to get the feel of it and see what I thought. But it just made me think a little more. So the next section that we hadn't gotten to in the Lord's Prayer was, she has it written, and do not bring us into the time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one. We usually say, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And I put some questions there, but we can also talk a little bit about, what the way she words it. And if does that change anything, or is it evil one? Does that change anything from just evil?
Well, the question of, do you believe God tests people? She goes into that. And most of her examples are of the Satan or the evil one or evil itself tempting or testing Jesus and others. But then she has at least two examples where God tested. The first one, Abraham. And then she talks about Job, but that's not God. Well, it was God letting Satan do it. I guess that's her other example.
Yeah.
So that was interesting because, I think both of those could be questioned as to whether God was the tempter or the tester. So maybe it is more evil that tempts us than tests us, however we understand evil.
Yeah, on page 87, she has a quotation that no one when tempted should say, I'm being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself tempts no one, but one is tempted by one's own desire, being lured and enticed by it.
Yeah, from the Epistle of James.
Yeah.
And then she quotes Pope Francis as saying, do not let us fall into temptation, or do not abandon us to temptation. I mean, the piece that I would take is that if we are tempted, we have the resources to combat it. That's kind of what I get from all that she's saying.
That's true.
And the resources she lists are scripture, the community, hello, morning sermon, the spirit, and our own conscience.
Yes.
So when we think of, that those are the resources we have to resist and overcome whatever is tempting us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that whole last paragraph of that section on page 88 is pretty powerful. Do not bring us to the test can thus be summarized. Let us not be tempted to use our resources just for ourselves. Let us not come to a place where we lord it over others rather than engage in servant leadership. Let us not desire the splendors of the world rather than attend to its needs. If such temptations come, and they will, we know we have the resources to resist and to overcome: the scriptures, the community, the spirit, and our own conscience.
Yeah. And that also kind of ties over to our building treasures in heaven for this week's reading. Yeah. Anything else on this one?
It was interesting too that the Babylonian Talmud offers a similar prayer.
Mhm.
I mean, I think we forget, how rooted in the Hebrew tradition are Jesus's words,
Mhm.
and she ends up somewhere by saying, anybody can pray this prayer.
Yeah. I remember that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not unique to followers of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure in her study, that's a lot of what she does, or I would think is take it back like she did earlier with the Beatitudes too,
Mhm.
taking it, back to the Torah and the Jewish religion that was, Jesus was Jewish. So I'm just understanding that.
On page 89, she also has I think, a very interesting paragraph, the first one that starts there about deliver us from evil, the various ways that different churches pray that. She says, it makes more sense to many today for whom Satan is just a metaphor rather than an actual being. Here we need to avoid the temptation of condemning people who hold one view as opposed to the other. People who believe in Satan should not be dismissed as silly or superstitious. People who do not should not be condemned as anti-biblical or atheistic.
Yeah.
I can see those both happening back and forth.
Mhm. Yeah. I always think of Flip Wilson with the devil made me do it.
Yeah.
She quotes that so in the last paragraph.
Does she have it in there?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. The devil made me do it, right? How did we ever get the view of Satan with, the ears and this pointed tail and where did that come from?
I have read something about that, but I mean, it seems like it was like the Crusades or something. I don't know, somewhere way back there that someone created that image, but I don't remember.
Someone probably created that image because that's how, that was their view. And it just, if it were today, you would say it went viral, but.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
But the reality is that, I mean, when you think about other renditions, I mean, Satan, evil really probably comes most disguised in the most familiar
Mhm.
and the most ordinary of ways. I mean, when you think where your own temptations come from, they sometimes come from, lurking even as good.
Mhm.
Or the world, calls it good, but there's probably not.
Well, what
There-
about instead of an external force like that, the fact that we all have free will, that humans have free will, and some are going to decide to do something that is destructive, and some are going to decide to do things that are not.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And
Or
where does, I mean, it doesn't have to be, quote, Satan or the devil or anything. I mean, the fact that we just have free will, that we can decide whether we want to go, and looking into the treasures for this next chapter, we want to go for what's our benefit as opposed to what's for the benefit of mankind.
Mhm.
Right. So I guess then underneath that though is, what is the tempting factor? What is the underlying reality that is pulling us toward destructive behavior instead of constructive behavior?
Mhm.
I mean, I look down here, personally, I don't need a Satan to recognize the things in the world that tempt us. And then she says drugs, alcohol, gambling, pornography, and so on. Well, it would be the and so on that would tempt me because I'm
Uh-huh.
personally not tempted by drugs, alcohol, gambling, or pornography. They're not in my personal but
Yeah.
there's plenty of other stuff
Right.
food that I don't need to be
That's
eating.
what I was gonna say, like overeating for me, that she hits kind of hard in the one on fasting and all. But yeah, I think it's the small things too. Man, I think it's-
Or just, you know,
Let
And
me
I think-
just say that one of the things that surprised me was how much dealing with alcoholism and drug addiction was part of my ministry. You know, I hadn't grown up with any of those issues, and there was a lot going on.
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, there are plenty of people that are tempted by those things, but I just thought it was interesting that those were the 4 things
That Sheila,
Mentioned.
that she
yeah.
listed.
yeah. Um, yeah, and I think with this one, we have to, I think with mental health issues that are around today and everything that, it goes to that judgment again, that we'll talk about in a little while, you know, just being sure that we understand when people have some things going on, that as hard as they may try, you know, they can't do it by themselves without some kind of help.
Right.
So, and then this, actually, the ending, she was saying is not, guys, for a minute, is not in either Matthew or Luke, but it's found in the, and I don't know how to say this.
Didache,
Thank you.
I think.
I knew someone would know how to say it.
It means the teaching.
Okay. And so I thought it was kind of interesting that we picked it up from that that translation, that particular thing. Again, which goes back to the Hebrew, right? So, right?
I think it's a Greek word.
Greek. Oh, there it is. Person now records such words of praise and doxology. Okay.
I agree.
Yeah.
Somebody else one of those preacher kind can correct my pronunciation, but
No, Didache was right.
yeah.
But the part that did anyone else get thrown? Maybe I'll say this. At the very end on page 90, when she goes into, if we recognize that these political terms refer to something theological rather than human, we're better able to challenge injustice in the present. I couldn't figure out the political terms. I'm
Kingdom,
sorry.
power, and
Power and
glory.
glory. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like you, Candy. I mean, when I first read it, I went, what political terms?
Yeah.
But if you think about kingdom, power, and glory, those were the 3 temptations of Jesus in the wilderness. And they are empire. I mean, those of us that have been doing the Sunday morning study talk about the royal consciousness and the empire a lot. And so they are terms of the empire. Kingdom, power, and glory belong, you know, to empire language. But Jesus, you know, has then claimed a kingdom of his own. And his power is a reverse of empire power, in that it's a power of love and justice and grace. And he certainly, you know, doesn't seek glory.
Thank you. That makes that paragraph so much clearer.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
just got
but
completely
you know,
thrown by
I
that
was reading through it
line.
and I thought, what political terms? And then it's like, oh yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think we could also say that his glory was shown in his death.
Yes. Yes.
So all 3 of those really fit him.
So when he totally emptied, as you know, poured himself out, the Philippians, poured himself out and poured himself out and poured himself out, that was his ultimate glory.
That'll change that for me when I say that part too. Because I really hadn't thought about it. And I loved what she said about, you know, what the kingdom would look like then, but I was just totally thrown by that one line.
Yeah, and then, I mean, that last sentence is pretty, if we do that well,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
are able to challenge the injustice in the present, then we do not have to pray for bread, since
Mhm.
everyone will have enough to eat. We will
Mhm.
not have to pray for divine will to be done on earth, since everyone will love their neighbors. And as Jesus would have it, their enemies as well. To that, amen, is the best response. So yeah,
Mhm.
duh.
Yeah, yeah.
So we keep on praying this prayer to bring us to that reality of, number one, to recognize the injustices of the present and pray that they might end.
Mhm.
Yeah, that puts a whole new light really on the whole prayer.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna just kind of say that too. It makes me think about it differently. It makes it have a little more meaning to me and
And
just not the rote taking it back.
It accentuates the comment. So Dr. Slatter, who was our Bible study leader at the Montreat conference that some of us went to a couple of
Mhm.
weeks ago,
Mhm.
and his comment was that the Lord's Prayer is a political statement. And so that's exactly what she's saying here in the end.
Mhm.
It is a very bold political statement. Thy kingdom come on earth means, you know, that everyone would have bread enough to eat and that divine will actually be done and everyone will love their neighbors and their enemies as well.
The
Mhm.
Catholics don't use that last sentence, do they?
I'm thinking, when I used to go with Terry a lot, that they do, I'll have to ask him to my memory, but they stop, as Matthew and Luke do. And then there are other prayers that are added in there. And then I think maybe the local church says this one at the very end, but they put it as a separate statement,
Separate statement, yeah,
or either they don't use it at all. My memory is fuzzy.
yeah. I was thinking they didn't.
Why?
Because it's not in Matthew or Luke, although that's sort of ironic because so much of the Catholic Church depends on tradition and what how the church has developed and what the church leaders have said. So I don't know why.
Yeah, I was just curious. So interesting. Well, she goes on then to talking about finding your treasure after the prayer in this next section. And I just kind of broke it out and thought we could read the verses that go with different sections of it. So this is the one about fasting. And then I put some questions on the next slide or some information that, you can pick and choose and get us, thoughts going, but I'm not tied to like having to answer one by one. Any volunteers to read this one about fasting from Matthew 6? I lost you
I
guys.
can do it. When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you.
So on page 93, she goes into talking about different reasons that people fast or different things that you can, get out of fasting and everything. So I just listed those. I have a friend who 3 times in her life she's fasted 40 days.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow.
she's experiencing so many health problems now as she's aging. And they said that a lot of it goes back to those long fasts like that. She would chew gum and drink like vitamin water or something like that. And that was it for 40 days. And she would pass out. I
Mm.
never understood. She and I would have these conversations. I was like, you know, and she's like, well, Jesus could do it for 40 days. And I was like, it was Jesus, you know. I was like, come on.
So her fasting was a matter of faith. It wasn't for a political statement.
No, it was, you know, a
Huh.
matter of faith, but so it kind of gave me this like aversion to the idea of fasting, just because, you know, I just saw her sticking to it so drastically, yet her body was saying it's time to stop, you know, and everything. So I just, that experience came back as I was reading through the information.
Mm.
I'm interested in reading this again. I mean, I have fasted for, 24 hours,
Mhm.
mainly during Lent. And the little booklet that I've ordered for myself to use as a Lenten devotional is encouraging that you fast, at least periodically through Lent. So I'm trying to gird up the courage. So it does, just that we can control our stomachs rather than our stomachs control us.
Mhm.
That's
True.
huge. And I guess the other thing is, one of the fruits of the spirit is self-control.
Mhm.
And I often, realize that's one that I struggle with from time to time. So it's good to try to really exercise that with considerable discipline.
I know Nancy and Harb, I think they still do it. They fast from Maundy, Thursday communion service till Easter morn.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a long fast.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I assume they're drinking water and whatever.
Yeah.
Mm. Anyone else had an experience or know someone who's had an experience in any of the other areas?
I thought that this comment on the bottom of 93 that said in pre-Christian Ireland, fasting people would station themselves at the door of the person who had committed some injustice against them. The fasting indicated the reverse of hospitality and was intended to shame the perpetrator into recompense or reconciliation. I'd never heard anything like that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I hadn't either, and I always kind of wondered, when you protest by fasting or hunger strike, quote unquote, it always seemed like you're hurting yourself. I never quite understood what. I guess I got the idea of the protest when I read through these and I thought about all the different ways. And when they explained that it was an insult to that person and things, it came clearer, of why people do this to me.
Well, and like in the case of Gandhi and others who have gone on hunger strikes, I think it is to call attention to the injustice that they are perceiving.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I thought that was just an interesting twist on it that she did
Mhm.
put in there.
Mhm.
Yeah. I guess experience community if you did it as a church or as a group of people.
Mhm.
Be that one. I thought it was kind of interesting that, intermittent fasting now has become the
Mm.
big diet thing.
Yeah.
So it just came to mind when I was reading this and I thought, just kind of like, I guess that's the exercising self-control. So then she gives
about 100 years ago, my wife Nancy and I decided to fast by eating during Lent 1 day a week on the budget that the welfare system allowed for people to buy food.
Mm.
We used, and at that time, it was like 40 cents.
Oh,
Wow.
Terrible. It was terrible. But we fasted one day a week by eating, rice. or we spent 40 cents. And it was amazing how difficult that was to think of fasting 40 days, just one day a week at that level. And I was thinking of that where it said to identify with the people who don't have food,
Hmm.
show solidarity with those who are hungry. It was impressive to me to
mm,
think how
Yeah.
hungry those people are.
Bill, you're saying that reminds me of, it's through the years we've done these hunger kind of meals,
oh, yeah.
where you're handed a random number and you go to that section. And so some people are served rice,
Mhm.
and some people are served, maybe rice and a vegetable. And then others are served, meat and rice and the feast. And so you sit there in that room becoming aware of where you are in the system. And then usually there's a discussion, about how you felt about getting nothing but rice, or how you felt getting the full meal as you watched others have nothing basically to eat.
Mm,
Um, so there is something to be said about, showing solidarity and becoming more appreciative of those who are hungry.
Mhm.
And I guess, having just done Open Doors, and you realize how hungry those people are when they arrive. And they don't get fed until 7 o'clock,
Mm.
which, that's late in the day. But it's usually, they may have taken with them something in the morning, a granola bar or something, but most of them haven't had anything to eat until then,
mm.
since a meager breakfast. So
Candy, back to your friend who fasted and what the Catholic Church does. They of course recommend during Lent fasting, but there are these exceptions. If you're in poor health, or if you're over, I think it's 65, then it's not considered. I mean, you can if you want to, but it's not considered expected like it is for younger people.
Mhm. That's interesting that they do look into that.
Yeah. I don't know how they came to, it's sort of capricious what year. You could say 60 or you could say, but
Yeah.
they came to that somehow, that 65 was the year.
Well, it's the quote retirement age.
Yeah.
I guess that's it.
Yeah, it was always interesting when I was teaching. We had some Muslim children that during Ramadan and stuff that would have to sit in the classroom during lunch or or something, and the other kids would always have like a gazillion questions about why they weren't going to lunch, and it was always interesting to hear them. Most all of them had a grasp on why they were doing this and everything. And so I was always just so impressed by their understanding. They were third graders, I was just understood that, they understood why they were doing this, why it was important, and explained it well to their fellow students.
Wow.
Good. I had a Muslim student in my French 4 class, and we were going on a field trip to Charlottesville to a French restaurant. And he said, well, I won't be able to go. I don't want to go and sit there. And I said, well, that's understandable. Then he came in the next day and he said, hooray, I can go. And I said, what happened? And he said, in our faith, if you're traveling, you don't have to fast. And he said, Charlottesville is traveling, so I can go.
Interesting.
Interesting. And his parents had explained that to him. And I suppose that was right. And, I was glad for him, but because he felt comfortable with the exception, even though he was pretty devout, and he still got to participate. So
That's neat.
So the next section was treasures in heaven. Excuse me. It's on pages 95 through 98 in your book. Again, to have a volunteer that would read maybe, all of it or part of it and split it with someone. I can start it off. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So again, there are some questions that the leader's guide had on there. And the last one is, how do you see opposition between God and mammon? Keep moving you guys around. I don't know if you can see me moving you or not, but I just keep popping you around different places. I will say, when I was typing these out, number one, we were moving from Pennsylvania to Ohio, and our moving van caught on fire. And so we pretty much lost everything that we owned that was, in the moving van. And so that just brought that home when I saw that, experience the loss of stuff that mattered to you. It was my hope chest and all that stuff was in there. I was in college at the time. So in some ways I was the luckiest one of the family, because I had some really special things with me at school, that were sentimental value and stuff. But I can remember my mom, they had to sift through all the ick. And I can remember her just coming home and just crying and crying, and stuff. And she was like, it would have been better to just have lost it than to have to, go through it all and everything. But I think the thing we all missed the most is all of our photographs were in there, before digital and stuff. So we lost all of our, all of our pictures from when we were kids, all of our, family pictures. And we tried to save some, and my brothers had some restored and what we could save and all. But I think in the end, it turned out that those memories were the thing that we all really missed the most out of it, was, those pictures and things. So anyway, that one just kind of spurred that memory on.
Yeah.
When I was in middle school on election day, somebody broke into our house outside of Chicago, and Mother was with somebody voting. I guess they had been watching the house or something. Anyway, when all this happened, and they mostly took jewelry, Mother was upset because she just changed the sheets and they had taken the pillowcases to put the jewelry in. That's what she's mad about. But anyway, the local high school, it was some high school boys, and he gave one of Mother's diamond rings to his girlfriend, and she was flashing it around, and they caught him.
Oh my goodness.
Sure.
So, but it was the violation of, it wasn't so much the stuff, but that somebody had come into your house.
Into your space, yeah, your private space, yeah. Mm. I guess,
Go
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was thinking of question 4, if I can jump there. I think the way she writes about it, and I guess the way I'm thinking too, is the opposition of God and mammon, because if you're worshiping your stuff, which, well, I fall into that myself, but, if it's that important to you, not the memories. I think that's different, Candy. That was your lives taken, not, I mean, but if you worship your thing so much that they define who you are, I guess that's what she's getting at, rather than worshiping God.
Yeah.
No. So one of my most powerful examples of generosity, I guess, is I was at a friend's house. This was years ago. And I just was admiring, she had one of the little hens, that sits in a bowl like thing. And I just was remembering that Charles's grandmother had one of those. And I was just kind of reminiscing about it. And she said to me, just take it,
Mm.
And I did. And it still sits on my kitchen counter. But every time I look at it, I think about that kind of generosity that could just let something go that easily and that generously.
Mm-hmm.
And I look around sometimes and think, what, I think I would be more ready to do that today than I would have been 20 something years ago. Which is when that was, because now I'm looking around at the stuff and thinking, nobody wants this anyway, so what's going to happen to it? So if someone actually walked in my house and said, oh, that's lovely, I'd love to have it, I think I'd say, take it.
Take it. Yeah.
Somebody is going to find pleasure in this that's been meaningful to me, because I don't know that anybody's going to that is connected to me.
Mm. I had a similar experience with with a stranger. I was at the Catholic Church interpreting, because they had the priest from Haiti there and they needed an interpreter. And so I stood with him as people came up afterward. Well, then an African woman came up. She spoke French. And she had a little pin on, it was near Christmas, on her shirt or on her coat that said Noel in French, of course. And I commented on how pretty it was. And she took it off and gave it to me. And I said, I, of course, said, oh, no, I couldn't. And she said, in my culture, that's what we do. And that really struck a chord with me. And I the same way, Mary Lou, with how you feel about that bird. Whenever I put that on, I remember her and feel grateful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think, was it at the very beginning that, she basically says, does our stuff, then we also have the ability to control our stuff. And so, do we let our stuff control us, or do we have the ability to let it go? I'm working on getting rid of a lot of just junk out of the back room. Mostly, it's just pure junk. You think you could just go through and pack it all up and say, be done with you.
Yeah. I fell into a time where a close friend just always was buying designer purses, and it had to be this name or that name for clothing and all this stuff. And I fell into that. And then it was like all of a sudden I realized, I thought, I'm putting myself in debt because I'm trying to keep up. It was kind of that keep up with the Joneses thing, you know, and I'm like, this stuff isn't even important to me. It's like not anything that I really aspire to have or anything. And I stopped and I thought, well, this destroy our relationship, because that had been something we had kind of shared that, and it did not, you know. And I feel so much more comfortable with myself and just with decisions that I've made. And I just think, you know, I got sucked right in there. It was really easy to go down that path and caused myself all kinds. And she was something about one cannot rely on, cannot trust stuff, you know, and stuff. And it just, I had forgotten about that actually until we were sitting here talking. And I thought that was, yeah, that was kind of a dark time for a couple of years there, of letting myself just kind of get sucked into the importance of stuff.
Hmm.
How do you all respond to question number
Go ahead. I'll
Right.
put it
Back.
3?
Oh, that's a good question. Wow.
Does store up treasures in heaven contradict salvation by grace through faith?
Hmm.
Huh. I guess if it's about thinking that works or how you know how you let go of stuff here then stores up rewards in heaven, then it very well might. But if it's just a reality, you know, that if you are able to not let stuff control you, that if you're willing to understand that life is more than stuff, and to give rather than take, I'm looking at the very last paragraph, then the response, and it's, you know, and it's not an out there kind of heavenly reward, it's a reality that heaven dwells within us. And so you have that peace that he goes on to talk about. And that sense that God's will is being done here on earth.
I think
That's
God
my
is
off the
pleased.
cuff.
I'm sorry.
Now just say that's kind of my off the cuff response to that.
Yeah. I think that God is, I can imagine God smiles sometimes when any of us happen to do something that is generous to other people or show compassion, you know, show anything that shows that anything that reflects anything of the life of Christ. I think God smiles and is pleased, but it doesn't mean that we've made it.
Right.
That doesn't mean that we've made it to heaven and get a front row seat. We just have pleased God. And that's a treasure in heaven. Gosh, I imagine God quite cries a lot too. God weeps, but also God smiles and says, "Wow," and maybe even just as maybe even sheds a tear of joy that by golly, we can do something that shows we have listened to Christ, like to follow Him. That's the treasures in heaven. But it's not enough. Again, it's not enough to somehow gain salvation. That's a different thing. We can do nothing to gain salvation.
So looking at the clock, it's 1:27. I want to make sure we have enough time to spend on Do Not Worry. So let's push that to next week and then that last chapter to finish this up. I just think that one is, and judging others too. Those are two big ones, I think, that we want to make sure that we give enough time to.
Yeah.
So if you'll join together with me in prayer as we think about living into the kingdom. Holy Spirit, you're ever
And
guiding
guide
us
us
and strengthen
in
us
us
to seek
seek
first
first
the
the
kingdom
kingdom
of
of heaven
and
and
God's
and God's righteousness,
so
so
that
that
we
we
may receive from God
God's
open
open
hands,
hands
all
all
true
true
treasures
treasures
as well.
as well.
as well.
For
For
the
the sake
sake
Of
of
Jesus, our teacher
and
and
Lord.
Lord.
Amen.
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 And what time are we meeting next week?
At 4, we'll be back on our regular
Okay.
schedule. And I thank all of you for your flexibility. The last couple of weeks, things got wonky. And I will see a few of you in a couple of hours. So
Yes, well, thank you,
That's right.
Candy. We
Thank
hope
you
you
so
feel
much.
better.
yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Have a
Thank you.
good afternoon and week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.